All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to week 10 here in CA 102, Culinary Concepts and Foundations. Chef Matthew and I welcome you to another fantastic live session. Week 10, I don't know what I'm going to do for week 11 because that's it. As far as the fingers I have, this course has flown by. Has it flown by for most people? Has it gone fast or slow? Fast? That's a sign that you're having fun, because once you get into the next course, it's even going to go faster. Once you get into 121, you're going to be rocking and rolling. Don't forget, once you get in there, you're going to be working without recipes. So it's a whole new world. Really focus on the techniques that you've learned here over the past 9 weeks and into 10, 11, and 12. Those techniques are going to carry you through the remainder of your course. But I really want to see everybody finish strong. This has been an awesome class. Chef Matthew and I have a lot of great things to say about y'all, but we really want to make sure that this class finishes strong. And we got a busy week coming up here in week 10. And we want to talk about last week briefly. I want to get some comments about last week, some of the potatoes and what people thought out there. Who wants to share something? Adam, what about you? What do you have to say about the potatoes? Adam?
Are you going to unmute me or mute me?
Yeah, you're good, Dan. I'm sorry.
They turned out pretty well. I cut it to 1/8 of an inch. My oven took about 40 to 50 minutes. But I really love the Dauphinos potatoes. Yeah, my my family really loved it, and they want me to make it again.
Cool, awesome. Those are good comments. John, what about you? Where's Jay? John. Right here. Yeah. What? How'd you feel about this week's assignment?
It was so I got all my mise en place done. And then I worked on doing it all one right after the other, because I wanted to bake the two together, or at the same time. I didn't want to waste any energy in the oven.
Right.
So putting it all together was kind of time consuming. It wasn't difficult. It was time consuming.
Right.
Yeah. And I did full order. I went ahead and just did a full recipe. I didn't do a quarter recipe because, go ahead and share with the family, that kind of thing.
Right. Which one did you like better?
I've got to say that I like the waxy potato better.
Nothing wrong with that, man.
I think it has to do with the cream and the cheese. Actually, putting the roux in it. I just think it was better.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. There's no right and wrong to that answer.
No.
Or that question rather. And some people just they love those scallop potatoes, and I think it's a familiar flavor and it's delicious. And some people just go crazy for the Dauphinoise.
Yeah, see, I think the starchy potato, using the starch instead of using the roux wasn't as creamy, and it wasn't as good.
It does make a difference, yeah. Thanks for those comments. Ivory, what about you? Ivory, can you hear me? Ivory, you down there, buddy? How'd you like this week's assignment? How'd the mashed potatoes come out? So? Yeah. Do you like the Dauphinoise or the scallop better?
Like the scallop better.
You like the scallop better? We got a 2-to-1 vote going here for the scallops. So cool. Thanks for your comments. It's a really interesting exercise, and I think we just heard some good stuff. The difference between the waxy and the starchy potatoes. When you guys get into industry, you start cooking in kitchens, you're going to notice most kitchens carry red bees, they carry russets. You're going to have certain responsibilities to carry out, and you're going to have to make those decisions about which potatoes to use based on what you've learned right here. So you'll certainly know the difference after this exercise. So that's a good thing. Chef Matthew,
watch your show, please.
Happy after Labor Day.
Yeah, boy, I did some cooking the whole weekend. We had family in from out of town, so it didn't stop till Tuesday, and I was like, I gotta work. So
yeah,
kick 'em out.
Yeah. So how do we do this week with our assignments, or how we look at?
I thought they were really good. I thought the mash looked beautiful, and there were even some comments like, "Wow, I can't believe potato puree is so delicious, and it tastes just like mashed potatoes." But they want to call it puree because they've made a better version of mashed potatoes. And you know, the sky's the limit on what you want to mix into those. And I think a lot of you did some experimentation with cheese and other things. And I can't remember who it was like, I put butter in everything, chef. I put more butter and more butter. Sorry, was that you?
Look at Crystal down there. Yeah.
I was like, yes, I totally agree. I'm there with you. And I like the cheese in the Dauphinoise too. I like the cheese in the scallop as well. That's my preference. I don't dislike it without the cheese. In fact, the first time I made it, I was amazed how good it was. But I do like the cheese in there. And, you know, there are so many wonderful cheeses you can put in there.
Anybody out there using the term au gratin in their narratives?
No. No. They were using gratin, but not au gratin. I think we've kind of dispelled that myth that au gratin means cheese. It really doesn't. So
cheese.
It doesn't mean cheese. It just means that browning. We had a lot of really nice browning. It's hard to get even browning on those, but I think most of you did a really good job getting them nice and brown.
Awesome. How are we doing with all the little stuff out there? Uniform, sanitation solution?
That stuff's looking really good too. I don't think I've taken points off for 2, maybe 3 weeks for things like that. All that little stuff we put behind us, you guys get the easy points, and I get your time grading. That's the way I like it.
That makes us happy. That's awesome news, man.
For you and for me, yes.
Yeah. How's the grading looking this week?
I'm a little behind the 8 ball, so it's kind of tough. I got a mountain looking at me right now, so I'm going to be up late tonight and late tomorrow night. That's for sure. So
everybody, be a little bit patient with Chef Matthew. I think he got hit really hard with submissions on Tuesday night this week because of the holiday. And what that means, I don't know if anybody's ever seen 100 people walk into a restaurant all at the same time. That slows service down just a little bit. It's just like an hourglass, right? You can have a lot of sand on the top and only so much gets through to the bottom, but I guarantee you he's going to get it cranked out for you right away. So just hang tight. He hasn't forgotten about you.
Now hold your hats on, keep your shoes tied, all that stuff.
All that good stuff, yeah. Anything else?
I just think you guys have done, and I have to say the narratives have steadily gone up and up and up. And I know I've been picky about it, and I've been pushing and prodding, but you guys are doing a great job on those. And I promise you, well, raise your hand if you think you're learning a lot from just doing the narrative, because it looks like it. Yeah, it looks like it. It really does. And because there's a lot of cool comments you guys are coming up with, really great, very smart observations, and that's what chefs need to look for. That's how you know when you're cooking Dauphinoise potatoes for 800 people, you know what adjustments to make so it comes out perfectly, because you can spot those little tweaks that you need to make. So trust me, you need that.
I did. I was working at a casino, and we did $20 million a year in food and beverage. The place was cranking, and it was a New Year's Eve, and we were doing a clear consommé with a dumpling made with duck confit, and then it had gold flakes in it. It was a very nice bowl of soup, or bowl of consommé rather. But unfortunately, the chef could not communicate what he wanted, and it turned out to be the biggest nightmare. And it took us hours and hours, and it cost the casino a lot of extra money trying to prepare that soup, because the chef didn't have the ability to communicate exactly what he wanted. So these narratives pay off in the long run. Pay attention to them. They're going to be a huge tool for you. If you cannot explain to your staff what you want, if you can't explain to your customers what you're trying to sell them, and then if you can't explain to your service staff what you're trying to get them to sell, it's going to be real tough for you out there. So these narratives, I'm so happy to hear that you guys are really progressing in that area. So that's awesome. Thumbs up to all of you.
A lot of thumbs up.
Yeah, moving on to our next thing. Let's take a look at our class page. See what we got going on here this coming week for week 10. If we take a look at our class page over here.
Good.
How many people are watching these little videos out here, these intro videos? At least one person. Come on. Thank you, Irene. Thank you. I put a lot of effort into those things. Yeah. So they're very, very important. It gives you little tips about the upcoming week and what's going on and things that you can do. We've got our research materials, which will coincide with our knowledge check and our conversion check this week. So make sure you take care of that. Live session Wednesday night, September the 15th, or September the 5th at 7 p.m. And you're all here. Just once again, if you can't make it, hit the live session archive button so you get credit for being here. Then we have a discussion board. We're going to talk about that here in just a couple of minutes coming up. And then this week we are working with starches. We're doing baked beans, New England style, and we're doing rice pilaf, and we're doing risotto. Down here at the bottom of the page, I put some stuff in here to help you all out that we're going to be referring back to throughout tonight's class. So make sure that you keep your eye on this when you go to do your assignments, because the information is there to help you get through it. Yeah. So knowledge checks, just as a friendly reminder, this class is pretty good. Last week, you guys did turn in quite a few knowledge checks, which is fantastic. Due by Saturday, ladies and gentlemen, get it in. Conversion knowledge check this week, due by Saturday as well. So it is extremely important. Following tonight's class, to spend a few minutes, get it done, bang it out. Don't put it off till the end, because those are the little points that kind of mess you up along the way. And then we have our discussion board this week, and it's kind of a cool discussion board. I think I started out at the beginning of this class. We were talking about remembering these techniques as we move forward into 121 with Chef Caesar, who was absolutely awesome. But you're going to have to spend a lot of time reflecting upon these techniques, because you're going to be using them as you move forward. So this week's discussion board, you need to, it's a minimum of 300 words that you need to submit. And what proved to be more difficult than what you originally thought it was going to be regarding this course, then you need to write about what you thought was less difficult about what you originally thought for this course. And then you need to write a little bit about how you feel about the improvement of your skills. So for example, you might want to talk a little bit about your knife skills, your knife cuts, your sanitation skills, your station setup, your narrative skills, which Chef Matthew just taught a little bit about. So there's a lot of information to discuss in there. And then we also want to know, as you're moving forward this week, or moving forward in your career, what are you going to concentrate on? Where is your level of concentration going to be? So some people will respond by saying, I plan to concentrate a little bit more into the garde manger area of the kitchen. That seems to be my real interest. I'm really interested in saucier. I'm interested in large volume production. I want to become an executive chef at a country club. I want to focus on that. So there's a lot of different things you can focus on in this industry. So we want to hear about that. Once again, Saturday, initial post. By Tuesday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time next week, you need to reply to at least 2 other people's posts with a minimum in your initial post of 300 words. So hope everybody understands that. We'll be glad to answer those questions again if you have any. So I look forward to that. These points are the things that make the difference between A, B's, and C's. So make sure you get these little points out of the way. 300 seems like a lot of words. It's not, right? It's a quick thing. All right, guys, into the kitchen. We are cooking with starches this week. And I'm sure some of you are probably out there kind of scratching your head. Like, starches, it is not spray starch. It is not cornstarch we're working with. We are working with legumes and then some grains, which are very, very popular in our industry. Starches, just to kind of give you a heads up about what they are, starches are a type of sugar, glucose to be a little bit more exact, which is a complex carbohydrate. So starches, that milky substance you get in the water when you cook rice, that is actually carbohydrate. That is actually sugar. So I got a question for everybody. A loaf of bread, a bowl of cereal, or a can of soda? Which one has more carbohydrates? Thumbs up if you think it's a loaf of bread. Thumbs up if you think it's a bowl of cereal. Thumbs up if you think it's a can of soda. Woo! Check you guys out, man. You guys are all very suave. You know what? They're all about the same. There's really not a huge difference in between a can of soda, bowl of cereal, and a loaf of bread.
A whole loaf of bread.
What's that?
A whole loaf of bread and a can of soda.
Yep, there's not a big difference in between the three items. But what the difference is that the loaf of bread or the bowl of cereal will be accompanied by additional nutrients. And they're also complex carbohydrates, which takes your body energy and time to digest, versus a can of soda, which is a very simple carbohydrate like a fructose or a simple sugar, which goes right into your system without any effort to digest. So those are some things to take into consideration with starches. Starch is found in most green vegetables, most tubers. There is some form of starch that grows. The plants produce those as a form of reserve energy for themselves. So that's why that potato is producing so much additional starch in there. It's a way to keep itself going during droughts and very difficult times. So that's why they produce that. But once again, these starches that we consume in our diets, such as legumes and rices, are beneficial carbohydrates to our bodies because of the amount of dietary fiber, minerals, and vitamins that are found in them, which makes a big difference. So legumes are going to be our first topic, ladies and gentlemen. Legumes oftentimes can be kind of a confusing thing about what they are and what they're not. They're basically a dried fruit in a pod at the end of the day. And that's basically what they're referred to as. Legumes are things such as peanuts, such as alfalfa, such as beans, peanuts, that type of thing, though, peas, lentils, those things are all considered legumes. So as you progress in your career, your chef is going to come to you, or you will go to one of your cooks when you become a chef, and you're going to say, hey, I need a dish with legumes for this evening's banquet. Hopefully not, this evening, but a little bit further out. But those are the things that they're referring to. Legumes as themselves don't have a tendency to have a great nutritional value to them. They're not great, they're not bad, they're kind of right down the middle. But why they are fancied by so many people because of their high level of protein, which is a very important part of the human diet. So for non-meat eaters and that type of thing, beans are an essential part of their diet. And it's kind of interesting to note that when you eat beans with rice, it provides the human body with all 8 essential amino acids. So it's a very, that's why that dish has been around for so many years. There's a reason for it, because it provides such great food for the human body. Our first exercise this week is going to be baked beans. And we're kind of in a little odd scenario here with the baked beans. Generally, I like to talk about the recipe and talk to you about how to prepare it. However, I really wanted to share with you a PowerPoint that a student put together, and it is absolutely fantastic. Before we start this exercise this week, make sure you stick with the recipe. It's very, very important for evaluation purposes. It's really going to help out Chef Matthew. So these are classic New England baked beans. They're sweet, they're syrupy, they're saucy, so they are absolutely delicious. So great self-identification from this young lady, right on the money. sanitation solution, mise en place, and you'll notice she's got bacon. This recipe does call for salt pork. However, if you don't eat pork or you don't can't find the salt pork, you can certainly substitute bacon or just omit it altogether. All you have to do is just make sure on your narrative sheet you make a quick note to Chef Matthew saying, hey, I don't eat pork. No problem. This way, when he goes to evaluate your recipe or your dish, you're not going to have any concerns or challenges. The beans, it's essential. You can use Great Northern beans. You can use kidney beans. If you can't find any of those, I mean, a different type of bean, such as a black bean, would work perfectly fine as well, not preferred. Preferably, it'd be the navy beans or the pinto or the kidney beans for this exercise. You're going to want to make sure that, number one, you rinse them, okay? They need to be laid out onto a tray, and then you need to look in the beans for debris, right? Beans are historic for having small rocks or other forms of debris that are actually in the packaging. For those of us that have been in the industry for a long time, whenever you have a 50-pound bag of pinto beans, it's a good idea to get the dishwasher on its downtime to start sorting through the beans, looking for rocks and everything else. So number one, you want to sort those beans. Then you want to put them into a bowl. You want to rinse them. And you want to make sure that you remove any type of dirt or other bacteria that was too small for you to see. And then you're going to cover them with cool water. And then you'll cover that, and you'll place that into your refrigerator for the prior day. So you want to let them soak overnight. It's going to greatly reduce your cooking time. If you don't have time to do that, you still have the option of cooking them straight. However, this is going to save you a lot of time by letting your refrigerator handle some of the prep work for you. So you're going to let them soak for about 24 hours. You want to make sure that you're not getting a lot of scum and stuff up at the top, especially bubbles. That's a good indication that you did not rinse your product properly, or the container that you're storing them in is not clean. So there is sanitation involved in this. So once again, step one, sort through them on a tray, look for rocks, debris. Step two, rinse thoroughly in the bowl, cover with water. I always drain the water out and then fill it back up maybe 2 or 3 times to make sure I get rid of all the debris. Then once they're covered with cool water, you're going to cover them, place them in your refrigerator the night before. And then as you start to cook them, you can either cook these in water or stock with your sachet and your salt pork or your bacon. And as you're cooking them, you want to make sure that you are skimming the scum from the top. That's a coagulated protein that rises to the top, and it's going to create a very cloudy, and it'll also give a kind of an off bitter type flavor to it. So you want to make sure that you thoroughly skim that scum from the very top. The beans, when they're done cooking, you're going to drain them. And you're going to reserve some of the cooking liquid because you're going to need that for the baked bean recipe. It's very, very important. So you're going to strain them into a colander. You know that they're done when you can just pinch them and they easily fall apart. You want to make sure that they're whole, that they're not falling all over the place, and they're not shredded, but you should be able just to pinch them. They should be very, very tender. I always recommend tasting them. Make sure they're al dente, tender to the tooth. It's very, very important. Once again, by leaving those soaking in your refrigerator overnight, you're going to reduce your cooking time in about half. So, let your refrigerator do some work for you. You're going to save yourself a lot of time. After your beans are drained, you're going to take some of the cooking liquid and you're going to mix it with molasses and ketchup, brown sugar, brown sugar, dry mustard, salt, and pepper, and you're going to make that mixture, and then you're going to put it back into the beans, and then you're going to bake it in your oven about 300 degrees for about 2.5 hours to get that sauce to congeal, get thick, and get that nice sheen to it. So that would be the beans from start to finish. Chef Matthew, did I miss anything on that?
No, that's it. I think you made your point on the beans really well. There are a couple different varieties of beans you can use. That's safe to do. And I always make sure that I cover them. At least I figure like 1 part beans and 3 parts water. Because what happens to beans when they soak in water? What do? They expand. Yeah, they soak up the water. So
right.
You don't want the beans to soak up all the water, and then there's no water on top of them, because then the top ones get dry again. So it kind of reverts back. So you want to make sure they're adequately covered, and it's about 3 to 1.
Absolutely. So we asked this week, definitely the 3 to 1, ample amount of water in there. And we asked this week that you don't deviate from this recipe too much. It's really important that you're just focusing on the technique, on how to cook these things, how to care for them, how to make sure that you prep them for cooking, and then how you get that finished glaze at the very end. That glaze with the New England baked beans, once you learn the technique, you can do so much stuff with it. I mean, it's endless as to how you want to prepare that. You can, delete the brown sugar, add Pinocchio, which is a really common Latin ingredient. You can add an achiote to it. You can add, I've seen people add dried fruits to it. So it's a pretty much unlimited thing that you can do as far as that. So let's take a look at our next assignment, which is going to be rice. Huge misnomer out there, right, about what rice pilaf is. And Chef Matthew and I have talked about this. And I remember growing up in the industry when I used to know everything about cooking. I always thought rice pilaf was, had these herbs. And Chef Matthew, what were you going to ask? You were talking about rice pilaf earlier.
So how many people before you saw that recipe thought that rice pilaf had peas in it?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you're not raising your hands. You're pulling my chain here.
I think we got some people in the closet in here.
Yeah.
That's not right.
Or the ones without the screen on, they're raising their hands, but we just can't see it.
I'm on your side. I always thought it had all sorts of herbs and all that other kind of stuff. And you know what? At the end of the day, rice pilaf is nothing more than rice that has been sauteed till browned and cooked. That's it. That's all it is. And what you do to your rice pilaf beyond that is up to you. And we'll get into the recipe here in just a moment. But there's some really cool stuff about rice that's out there. And all of you, I guarantee you 110% that you will be cooking rice in your career at one point in time or another. Dan's like, no, hang on, dude, hang on. It's going to happen. Rice is the world's second largest crop behind corn, and it grows on every continent. There's more than 40,000 varieties of rice out there that are growing on all continents, like I just said. And rice is it's very high in complex carbohydrates with that starchiness, that milky water that generates when you cook. It's got no cholesterol in it. It's very low in sodium, and it's got virtually no fat in it. So it's a fairly healthy food consumed in moderation. My personal favorite rice to use in the commercial environment is converted long grain rice. Is anybody familiar with what that is? Kind of, sort of, so, maybe no. Converted long grain rice is basically rice that has been soaked, steamed under pressure, where they remove the bran, then it's been cooked, and then it's been dried, and then it goes to market. That cooking process does extract a lot of the minerals and vitamins. You do lose the bran, and the bran is the difference between white rice and brown rice. And so there are some nutritional benefits that lose. However, in the industrial setting for restaurants, when you're doing a buffet, and that buffet is going to be open for 2 or 3 hours, you want a rice that's going to remain stable, fresh, fluffy, looking good on your buffet. You also want a rice that prepares consistently out there. So I prefer the converted long grain rice. It's not only more cost effective, but it also is much more consistent in its preparation. That's up to you. Once you guys become chefs, you are the author of your own destiny. So you'll be able to figure that out. Common types of rice out there, I just mentioned the brown rice, the long grain rice, the converted rice, basmati rice, jasmine rice, black rice. Wild rice is not rice. Okay, we'll get that up front. Okay, that is actually a member of the grass family. And it is a member of the grass family. It's not Bermuda or rye, and it's not on a golf course, but it is a member of the grass family. So you want to make sure you don't get that confused on your menu. It's something that really drives me crazy. When I see wild rice listed, it should be wild grass. Am I right, Chef Matthew?
Yeah, that's right. It works well with rice because of the shape and texture, but I don't think there's any rice you can cook it with. You have to cook it separately. But
right.
Yeah.
And it takes forever to cook. Yeah, ever and ever. So, talking about the rice pilaf this week. The recipe is down and dirty and simple. On the actual recipe card itself, there are a lot of different variations listed. My recommendation to all of you is to keep it simple, Sam, because your only focus for this is to learn the actual technique of preparing the rice pilaf. I think this is probably in a little bit too small a type for everyone to read out there. However, I would stick with the easiest procedure that you can find. Spanish rice, barley pilaf. I would not do barley pilaf. We're trying to do rice pilaf this week. Do not do orzo. Orzo is not rice. It is a type of pasta. So that should not be listed as well. And the procedure is extremely simple for preparing the rice. You're going to heat your butter in a very heavy saucepan. Make sure it's got a heavy bottom on it. The thinner saucepans will definitely burn your food much, much quicker because they conduct the heat at extremely fast pace. So they get real hot real fast. They get real cool real fast. So you want to avoid using a thin pan. You want to use a heavy metal pan. You're going to add the onion after your butter melts. You do not really want to brown the onion. You just want to get that onion nice and translucent. And what that does is it begins to break down the vegetable fibers. It releases the juices, and it creates that depth of flavor that we look for in foods. So it's critical to, when you can pick that onion up and you can look through it, right? It's translucent now. You can add your rice. This particular recipe calls for it without washing. If you're using the converted long grain rice, I would agree. If you are using other varieties of rice, such as brown rice, which will be higher in starch, I recommend washing that rice to remove some of that starch from it. It will help you create a much lighter, fluffier product in the end. So you're going to add your rice. You're going to stir it until it becomes completely coated in the butter, and you're going to allow that rice to brown, slightly brown, light brown. You could even call it tan if you wanted to. And what that does is that alters the starches, but it also creates kind of a slightly nutty flavor to it. And that is that rice pilaf flavor that we talk about so much. And then once you've got all that in, you're going to go ahead and you're going to cook that off in your oven at 350 for about, I would check it after about 15 minutes just to see the level of your liquid. If the rice is still real tough and difficult to eat, you're going to have to add a little bit more liquid. Remember, a lot of years in the kitchen here, you can always add more liquid, but taking more liquid out is very difficult because that rice will continue to absorb, right? And you don't want that. It's very, very important that when this rice is done cooking, do not leave it in the pan. We do not do that in industry. In industry, when we make rice pilaf, we make 10, 20, 30 pounds at a time that we'll use over the course of 2 or 3 days. So you want to cook your rice pilaf when it comes out of the oven. You're going to lay it onto a sheet pan, a small cookie tray if you have one at home, or a larger flat dish, and you're going to kind of fluff it with a fork and allow it to cool quickly. If you don't do that and allow it to sit in the pot, it's going to suck all that steam up or suck all that remaining liquid in, and it's going to become almost like a block. And you want that rice to be nice, light, fluffy. So that's a very critical part of it. You can add additional butter to it at the very end if you choose to do so. I don't, because we reserve that for the actual cooking process. So Chef Matthew, did I miss anything on rice pilaf?
No, you didn't miss anything. There's just something I like to point out. I think it's a good opportunity when you think about sauteing the onion. A lot of chefs refer to onion, carrot, celery, herbs, garlic as aromatics. Right in the beginning, you notice that rice. Same with the risotto, you're going to be sauteing onions. Now, haven't we made some things already where we saute onions first and then add other ingredients? You'll notice that when you make soup, you'll notice when you make sauce, you're going to be doing a lot of that. You sweat those vegetables first and then you add other ingredients. It's a process that you're going to see over and over. Heat up your oil, saute your aromatics, add whatever it is, in this case, rice. So we're sweating those vegetables for a reason. We're developing a layer of flavor for a reason, and it's best to develop it like that. Could I take that rice and throw it straight in water and then take diced onions and throw it straight in the water and just cook it like that? Sure, I can do that. I'm not going to develop the flavor, though. So
right.
There's a purpose for that process. Just get used to that process because you're going to do it a million more times.
Right. And that's really what Chef Matthew's talking about, which is excellent. What he's saying is really understanding this technique, what's behind it. Once you understand this technique, then you can branch off and go in any direction if you want to. You can be sweating parsnips in there if you want to. It doesn't matter. But what's really important is learning to sweat those vegetables properly in the butter and allowing those flavors to come to the surface. When you break down the vegetable fibers that are found in carrots, onions, celery, bell peppers, garlic, that type of stuff, those carbohydrates, those juices leach. And when they leach, they concentrate. And then that flavor is developed that Chef Matthew's talking about. So I think it's extremely critical at this point. Does anybody have any questions about the rice or the beans so far?
I think John had a question we missed a little bit ago.
Jay? No? Jay, you didn't have one?
I have a question about the rice.
Sure, go for it.
When you were saying, what was the one you had called it? The converted long grain, is that just any long grain rice that's white?
Yeah, but you want to make sure that you avoid things like minute rice and those. I don't know what those are. Those are some kind of fabrication from somebody. I'm not paid by Uncle Ben's, but I think Uncle Ben's is probably one of the best rices out there on the market as far as consistency and quality is concerned. There are some other ones. Yeah, the less expensive rice is traditionally the more starchy rice that's going to clump together and become very difficult to cook with. Whereas, the Uncle Ben's, if you just want a standard white rice, Uncle Ben's is my preferred brand, and I buy that in very large containers in industry. They sell it in 50-pound sacks, so it's very, very common. Jasmine rice is also another great one. It's a little bit more aromatic, as well as basmati. It's a long, thin rice versus kind of a shorter, a little bit thicker rice. The jasmine or the basmati have a tendency to fluff up real well. The cooking process is very, very simple, and they're not that high in starches. But they are a little bit more expensive.
And you don't soak or rinse your white rice?
If I'm working with a less expensive white rice, then I will rinse it. If I'm working with a brown rice, I'll rinse it. Those have a tendency to be much higher in starches. Those starches force those grains of rice to stick together. So we want to avoid that. Remember, we want a nice, light, fluffy rice when we're done. So
you just put the Uncle Ben's in a bowl, soak it for a little bit, and just kind of run it around with a spoon, or
Uncle Ben's right in the pot.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't even need to rinse it. Yeah, and when I say rinse rice, I'm referring to putting it into your colander and just running some water over it and swishing it around a little bit to remove that. There's no soaking involved. That's not necessary. If you soak the rice, it will absorb some liquid. It'll come out a lot mushier on you, and it will not hold its shape.
Okay.
So you want to.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
Cool. Anybody else have questions about the rice or the beans so far?
Just a comment. I mean, look at the directions on the package. I mean, the recipe.
Too easy.
Yeah, the recipe we have is calling for converted rice, I believe. So if you buy a rice or use a rice that's not converted rice, you're going to have to alter that recipe based on what that package says. Like parboiled works slightly different than converted rice. Jasmine and basmati take less water in ratio. So it just depends on the rice you're using. Just be careful. Stick to the recipe for now so you get that process, because that's what's important here. And please experiment with rice sometime, because that'd be very beneficial.
Yeah, and absolutely good comments. Generally in industry, as a rule of thumb, we do 1 to 2 for the rice to stock. So 1 part rice, 2 parts stock, or 1.75 to be a little bit more conservative for your ratio of rice to liquid. So that's just kind of a general rule of thumb. So if you're adding 1 cup of rice, you're going to add 2 cups of liquid. And that's just kind of a general industry standard. So any other comments about rice or beans? All right. We don't do New England baked beans here. Not in Tucson. It's all refried beans. Every single last one of them is refried. I don't know what that's all about. Let's move on to our next thing here, people. Ladies and gents, we're on to one of the most exciting dishes that I love. I really get into this. Risotto. Risotto, when made properly, risotto is a rock star on any of my menus when the cooks prepare it properly. It's very important. Risotto is about 2 things. 1 is the actual rice that you use, and 2 is the technique. If you can master this technique, you're going to really broaden your horizons, because there are a lot of different directions you can go in with risotto. They've had risotto restaurants open in Seattle, restaurants in New York that only serve risotto. How many of you out there have had risotto? Let me see a show of hands. Show of hands. Yeah, some of you guys have. Nate, you've never had risotto? They have it in Texas, though, don't they? They got to have risotto there. Risotto's all over the world. It's an Italian dish of Italian origin, rather, and it is made with a very specific type of rice. Tonya had brought this up earlier in the class, saying that she could not find the rice. The type of rice is called arborio rice. It is listed in the actual recipe itself, the spelling of it. It is a short, fat, starchy rice. And I don't know how else, I'm not trying to be mean to it, but it is short and fat, and it is starchy. And it can be a little bit more expensive than traditional rice. We want that short, fat kernel to absorb the liquid as we're cooking it, and that starch creates this lovely creamy sauce from the stock that you add. So when we go to make our risotto, I keep it simple on this recipe. It's very, very important. I want to bring the recipe up for you real quick to take a look at it. Try to stick to the recipe. It's very, very important, because you're just really trying to learn the technique of this dish. So if you take a look initially, you're going to be putting butter and oil in a straight-sided pan. The reason we use butter and oil is it raises the smoke point of the butter. It's very, very important to remember this, because you don't want that burnt butter or brown butter flavor in your risotto. You're not trying to achieve that. You're going to mask the other flavors if you do that. So whenever we cook with butter, we have to cook over lower temperatures. However, when we add oil, we raise the smoke point or the flash point of that oil, meaning it will not smoke at that low temperature. You've actually raised the temperature when it smokes. Make sure that you use a straight-sided pan if possible. We don't like to use saute pans because they have the sides that kind of, stuff kind of goes out of there. And then you want to make sure you use a heavier bottom pan when you make the risotto, because you have to maintain that consistent heat throughout the process. If it's a really thin pan, you're going to burn the bottom of that risotto like that. So do your best to find a heavy pan. It's very, very important for the heat conduction. So you've got your butter, and you've got your butter and your oil in the pan. You want to have it over about medium heat, and you're going to add your onion. You're going to saute it once again until those onions are translucent. Same story as the rice pilaf. Repeat, ditto, whole 9 yards. You want to let those fibrous juices come out. You want to let them concentrate. You don't want to brown those onions. It's not necessary. We're not looking for that flavor profile. You're going to add your arborio rice to your pan, and you're going to stir it around for just a couple of minutes until those rice kernels, that arborio rice, becomes thoroughly coated. If you cannot find the arborio rice, you can look for Calrose, or you can also look for sushi rice. Calrose is sushi rice. They're similar in nature because of their high starch contents. You don't want to be using converted rice for this. You're not going to quite get the effect. However, if that's all you can find, let us know and we'll work with you. So now you've got your straight-sided pan, butter, oil, arborio rice, onions in there. You've stirred it. Now, this is the odd thing with risotto. You're going to take about a 6-ounce ladle and you're going to pour that in there. Just 1 ladle of stock. And you're going to stir that pan over your medium-low heat until that arborio rice absorbs that stock. Once that happens, you're going to repeat the process again and again and again until that rice becomes very tender to the tooth. You want that rice to be very, very, or not saucy, but what's going to happen is that rice is going to become, that starch in the rice is going to create kind of a thick sauce. It's almost like it's in cheese or there's cream. Am I right, Chef Matthew? Kind of cheesy.
Yeah, it kind of creates its own sauce, I guess, its own cream. Yeah, there's no other way to say it.
So as you're cooking your risotto in the pan, this is not arborio rice, but this is a risotto technique. You're gonna, when the broth gets to be about that low, you're gonna add another one. This is arborio rice here up on the screen right now. It's very short, fat. It's almost round in nature. But once your rice becomes that dry, you're going to add another ladle of your stock. And that's the arborio rice right there. Once the rice is very tender to your tooth, al dente, you can bite into it easily. Then you're going to go ahead, if you choose to do so, you can butter it out and cheese it out. If you notice this is a nice looking one. I know Chef Matthew was talking about peas earlier. Peas are not a requirement for the risotto. But if you look, it looks nice and creamy, right? It's not a dry looking dish. So you need to make sure when you put it down onto the plate, it should still hold its shape, but it should just be wanting to sit down. Just want to come down. It should still hold its initial shape though. It's very, very important. This is the cooking process. Again, if you notice all these white lines in here and how it's no longer translucent, the starch has mixed with the stock to create that sauce. That's another image. This is a finished risotto right here. It almost looks like it's in cream, but it's not. It's the starches from that sauce that mix in there. And this is a beautiful serving of risotto on the plate, nice and relaxed. This is another nice, that's about the portion size that we're going to want to see in this week's assignment. Very, very important. And that's enough of that. So we can't go a week without seeing a Chef Luke video because I got to hear the music. I got to hear it, man. And I'm hoping he's chosen some cool tunes this week. So let's take a gander at this and we'll see what he's got.
Should be Italian music in this one.
Like Dean Martin or something, right?
Yeah.
Chef, what portion do you want us to do this week of the recipe?
Good question. Hold that thought. That's a great question, though. So he's stirring, adding, stirring, adding, stirring, adding. You have to constantly stir this dish, cook it down till it's all sec, almost dry. Then you're going to add more, and more. It's critical. Butter, Parmesan is not absolutely required, but if you like to, certainly do it.
It's so good in there.
Oh, it's addictive.
Mm-hmm.
Little Pecorino Romano over the top.
Goodness.
Delicious. And the usual thumbs up from Chef Luke.
Chef, did you call that al sec?
What's
Almost
that?
Dry?
Almost dry. Almost dry. So you're going to add, you've got your straight-sided pan, your rice, your onion, your oil and your butter in there. You've got everything thoroughly coated, about a 6-ounce ladle of stock. Stir it over that heat until that stock is almost completely absorbed, almost au sec, almost dry. Then you're going to hit it again and again and again until you achieve that tender, creamy appearance to it. Now, who asked about the portion size?
Archie, I did.
Archie, cool. That's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. Okay, risotto traditionally is served as an entree versus a side dish, right? We had this question last week with the Dauphinoise potatoes. The Dauphinoise potatoes or the scallop potatoes or the Palm Spree would be considered side dishes, right? That's a 4 to 6 ounce portion traditionally in a restaurant, maybe 3 ounces depending on your style of service. So risotto, you're going to get a little bit closer to the 8 to 10 ounce range as far as your actual service size is concerned. So you want a cup and a half. Does that sound about right, Chef Matthew?
Yeah.
That's about 12 ounces by volume, a cup and a half. So you're going to put that onto the plate. Now, traditionally, risotto can be served with a lot of different things in it, right? Grilled asparagus is a delicious accoutrement to that. Grilled shrimp. I've seen people put roasted chicken in there. So once you've learned this technique, it is really up to you about what you want to put into this risotto. I guarantee you, though, and I'm not selling carbs, but I guarantee you, once you have one bite of risotto, you're going to come back. That risotto is addictive. Right? It's an absolutely, and it's got no cream, it's got no dairy other than the butter in that. It's just a natural sauce that is created with the use of the starches in the rice. Does anybody have any questions? Any thoughts, concerns?
Vincent has a question, and I'd like to make one comment. Go ahead, Vincent.
What you got, Vincent?
You put it in a pot, put it in the oven. What if the pot has a plastic handle? That don't go in the oven.
No, actually, that's kind of a good point. In industry, you're not going to run across that because it's pretty rare that you're going to see a pot with a plastic handle on it. Because generally they're all aluminum or all stainless, one or the other. At home, if it's a heavier duty pot, it's a good possibility that pot is rated for some oven. Or you can bake in a Pyrex dish for the rice. That's perfectly fine as well. Or a shallow pan would work just as fine.
Okay, all right.
Does that answer it?
That's fine.
Cool. What about Dorielle? What do you got? What do you got, Dorielle?
Hey, Chef.
Hi.
My question is about the dark corn syrup. If I can't find the molasses, would I need to put more brown sugar with my dark corn syrup?
You can actually substitute light corn syrup, which is fine to use, but preferably molasses is the ideal product to be using. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, no, because brown sugar is just granulated sugar with molasses in it. So, try to stick true to the recipe.
Okay.
Okay. Chef Matthew.
Good questions, everybody. Good question, Vincent. Thank you for asking that, and Dorielle too. That's a good question. So a comment I want to make about risotto. So thinking about it, you're gonna cook it for a while, or sweat it, or saute it for a while. Then you add a little stock. Then you let that stock cook in. And in the recipe it says medium heat. You want to be medium or a little bit lower. You don't want to be too hot because you don't want to cook the stock off. Then it won't absorb into the rice. So there's kind of a happy medium there where you want to have that heat at the right temperature so that the liquid absorbs into the rice rather than just boils off in your face.
Excellent point. And that's one of the reasons we want to use that thick, heavy-duty pot if possible. And something else that happens, the stock evaporates, it doesn't get into the rice, but then the starches also will begin sticking to the bottom of your pan and it becomes a mess, right? Mama doesn't like cleaning that stuff. So you want to make sure that you use the right pan over the right heat. It's critical. Let's take a look at our class page or our assignment page this week. We want to make Chef Matthew real happy this week. And it's pretty straightforward. We talked about our knowledge checks. We talked about our discussion board this week. Vitally important. I forgot to mention once again how important that discussion board is. The relationships that you're developing in this school will last you for the remainder of your career, without a doubt. I still talk to people that I went to culinary school in 1989 with, right? So, I mean, they don't go away. They're like flies. So you're going to be talking to these people for the rest of your career. And you know what? Develop those relationships now. They're going to benefit you in the future. So those discussion boards are vitally important. Taking a look at our rubric this week. Legumes, right? That's going to be our New England baked beans or New England style baked beans. Beans, the traditional self-identification photo, sanitation bucket, mise en place, goes through all three recipes. You need to prepare your beans to soak overnight, pitcher, right? Then the beans after they got done soaking, pitcher. And then skimming foam from the beans that we talked about earlier, pitcher. And then drained beans, pitcher. And then molasses mixed with dry ingredients, baked beans ready to bake, and baked beans plated entree size portion. That, once again, traditionally baked beans are not served as an entree. That could be a gaseous disaster. So we like to keep it between 4 and 6 ounces in size. Don't be killing any households with that. Rice pilaf. All right. The brunoise, the onion. All right. It's really important that when you are prepping out vegetables for rice pilaf, that they're not big. Otherwise, your rice gets lost. A dish is called rice. Let the rice be forward. So a brunoise, Chef Matthew will be checking for that week. Proper sweating of onion and rice in the pot. We talked about the fact we don't want to see any brown on that onion, but we do want to see some brown on the rice. It's very important. Properly cooked and fluffed rice. When that rice comes out, remember, lay it out on a sheet pan, fluff it with a fork, let it cool, right? Very, very important. Risotto, brunoise of onion, just like the rice pilaf. So when you're doing it once, do it for both recipes. Save yourself some time. Proper sweating of onion and rice in the pot. And then 1/3 of the liquid added, and then the remaining 2/3 of the liquid added. What does it look like? The starch, the gelatinization of the product. And then the finished and plated risotto, the short grain. We also have our narrative and production sheet this week, which is the standard. So, which you guys have been doing a great job on. Does anybody have any questions about anything we've said? Any thoughts or concerns?
I was just asking again with Chef Matthew about the portion size, because last week you said just do 1/4, and I thought that was to help us just learn how to break down measurements and everything else. But for this one, he was saying do the full portion that's on the actual menu, because we don't know how much we're going to make, or it could if we do too little, it could mess up the dish.
Correct. Absolutely. And the quantity that these recipes prepare is pretty small. So you're not going to have a lot of extra product. And since we're working with rice and risotto and that kind of stuff, they're fairly inexpensive dishes to prepare, other than the cost of the arborio. So feed your neighbors. Yeah, nothing wrong with that, man.
Sure, I sure don't mind keeping a little extra risotto around the house.
I don't think you're going to have issues with leftover risotto. I just don't. Yeah. I know Joshua is going to come out with a song about risotto next week. I can see it now, man. He'll be up there on stage, a little risotto stuck in his beard. He's going to be strumming away, man, all happy. I love it. Yeah. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? No? Fantastic class this evening. You guys rock. I am so forward looking to your assignments this week. Great job on week 9. Rock it out on week 10. We are almost there, man. Take it home, guys. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.